Rollo, I heard you and Mike talk on Fresh and Fit, and I didn't even know that lesbian couples have the highest rates of divorce. And if you compare homosexual couples to lesbian couples to heterosexual couples, heterosexual is sort of moderate. Gay
Mhm.
couples have the lowest rates of divorce. But what have you come to learn about the rising divorce rates in
Mhm.
amongst the sexes?
My best source on that is, divorce attorney Jim Sexton.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He's actually the go-to guy when it comes to statistics and stuff. You wanna talk about a guy who knows he's a consummate statistician. He knows all the numbers, and it was like watching it was like watching a surgeon work when he went on with Matt Walsh and talked about, the divorce industry, the marriage and divorce industry, and, what's funny is because he put it in a really human way because he was like, I believe in love. All these guys, men tend to remarry more than women, right? And even when the divorce rate is higher, like you get your, what is it, 67% of second divorces or second marriages end up in divorce, and 75% of third marriages end up in divorce. And so like those are some pretty, sobering statistics, right? But now the reason why we bring that up is because the common denominator is women, right? So
Mm.
the first thing, like you've probably heard the stat that it's 70%, at least in the United States, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. That's at
Yes.
70%. I don't know what the current numbers are. And so what does anybody say? Well, it's because men are assholes, and if they weren't assholes, then women wouldn't have to divorce them, right? And then we go, okay, well, let's look at lesbians. So there's two women in the marriage, and they still are the highest divorce rate because there's two women involved in this. And then you go and you look at the homosexual, like gay men, right? Which, by the way, is much lower instance of marriage. I'm just going to point out that the numbers are, like in aggregate are lower. But the fact of the matter is I think it's like 13% divorce rate for gay men. And because there's no woman involved. And so when you look at like gay men, you look at heterosexual couples and you look at like lesbian couples, the common denominator is the woman that's involved in it. And so that kind of puts a damper on this idea that it's men's fault, because if men were better, then women wouldn't have to divorce them all the time. And so that's why we quote that. It's funny to quote on Fresh and Fit. It's funny to put on Access Vegas because it shuts everybody. Women get destroyed on divorce, right? But what I always point out is that what's more, I think, interesting about divorce statistics is marriage statistics as compared to divorce statistics. So if you look at the average age of first marriage in the United States, for women, it's 30 years old, and for men, it's 32. Now that's up.
Mm.
So it used
Yeah.
to be much younger than that, even just as far back as the 80s, right? But we'll use those as the round numbers for right now. My I've done essays on this. I've done the research on this like over the course of really since like about 2012. And my 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 thought was this: like everybody keeps saying that frivolous divorce, meaning that 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Frivolous divorces are initiated by women, and how it's so overblown in the red pill, right? It's because men are assholes. If men were better, if men didn't, women don't want to divorce their husbands because they'll do worse off financially, and all this other like easily disprovable nonsense. But that's not what my point was. My point was, okay, well, is there a pattern to this? So if the average age of first marriage is, let's say, 30 years old, what's the average age of first divorce? Well, that happens to be anywhere between 5 to 9 years, is the average duration of a marriage before divorce occurs. That's why they call it the 7 years itch, because it's seven is the mean average between 5 and 9, right? So let's just say, for sake of averages, it's 7 years. So that woman marries at 30, she divorces at 37. Okay, that's just this side of 40. And she can start, saying, you know what, this guy's not who I wanted to be with. I've got my two kids. I'm gonna get out. Right. That's is there an incentive for women to divorce that is not there for men? That's the real question when it comes to like women who initiate 70% of divorces. Is there a financial, personal, or sociological you know, prompting? Is there an incentive for women to do that? To initiate divorce so they can get out, and then maybe at 30, 38 or whatever, then they play cougar for a couple of years, and then by the time they hit 40, they try to remarry or whatever. It's like the eat, pray, love narrative, or the Stella got her groove back, or whatever it is. You know, she's going to find somebody. I'll find somebody. I'll find true love, right? Or the one that got away. I'll try to rekindle an old relationship from when I was in college, kind of thing. And so it's a divorce. It's what we call divorce porn, right? It's this divorce fantasy that and like, by the way, it's sold in romance novels, it's sold in movies, it's sold in romantic comedies, it's sold in sitcoms, it's sold in your favorite Netflix series, that you're going to be just fine, girl, divorce him, and you're going to find the one that you should have been with and live happily ever after. And the reason why you're unhappy is because you married the wrong guy. He's the wrong dude. He's not your one, right? So I got thinking about that, and I go, is there you know, a consistent pattern? Is there a correlation for all of this? And so I started looking at this, and one of my old friends, Dalrock, who is more of a religious blogger, he was looking into it as well. And so he and I both went back through, like, from the 60s all the way up to like the mid, like, 20 teens, right? To see if there's a pattern there. Like, what was the divorce rate in 1975, right? And who initiated the most divorces? If you go back to 1965 to 1975, it is overwhelmingly married women initiating divorce, and it skyrocketed right after hormonal birth control.
Wow.
And if you look at and I did this. If you take the trackings, you can do this on Google, by the way. If you take the graph of the spike in divorces from 1965, and then you take the incident of prescriptions and usage, the popularity usage of hormonal birth control from 1965 onward, if you look at where the divorce and the hormonal birth control use goes, it's almost identical.
Shit.
Now, I know that correlation is not causation, but that's a hell of a correlation, and it looks almost identical. And to my knowledge, I'm the only one who's ever just, like, you know, superimposed those two on top of each other. So I was thinking, is there a pattern there? And turns out that there is, and it's a historical pattern that goes all the way back right to about 1965, because there are incentives for, like, no-fault divorce were there. The reason why we got no-fault divorce back in 1968, courtesy of Ronald Reagan in California, was to facilitate the amount of divorces that were coming through the California system at that time as a result of hormonal birth control and women wanting to get out of those marriages so they can go to Studio 54 and dance disco, right? Whatever it was that they wanted to do. And then what happened is, like, from 1965 to about 1975, maybe 1980, like in that period right there, you see, like, women enter the workforce. We have Title IX, militant feminism, like from Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan, all of that, the feminine mystique, our bodies, ourselves, the free love generation, the sexual revolution, all the things that happened in the wake of that. And you look at all the things that happened. Part of that was the divorce industry that we know today was forming right at that same time. So now we have the marriage industry that is intimately paired with the divorce industry. And lo and behold, the patterns still hold true. From what, like, back in the 60s, it turned out that women were still divorcing men at the higher rate, right? And there was a 7-year period between. It was still the average age of marriage was still 7 years, because that's where you get the movie from, like the 7-year itch, right? And so the ages might have been different. Like, the average age of first marriage in the 60s for women might have been 19, and for a guy it might have been 21 or 22. But the instances of divorce and the instances of, like, the duration of marriage before divorce, exactly the same. And so the only, like, the correlation that both Dalrock and I came to is that there is at least a financial or a social incentive. I'm not saying which, because I'm not that much of a statistician, but there's still a thematic kind of template for marriage, 7 years, and then divorce. And it's not because the guy was an asshole. It's just because that, you know, she didn't want to be with the guy anymore, or was not fun anymore, or, you know, marriage wasn't what she wanted it to be. There's any number of reasons. I can give any number of reasons for it. But what I can't ignore is the fact that there is a definite correlation between those two. So the more interesting thing about like who initiates divorce more? Was it lesbian women? Is it gay men and all that stuff? That it's funny to laugh at that on Fresh and Fit, but what's really sobering is to see, like, to consider what are the incentives? Why is it that women divorce 70% of the time and men want to stay in, it's cheaper to keep her, right? They don't want to lose
Yeah.
stuff. And for the most part, guys would be happy if they were just having sex regularly. And men will tolerate a lot if they're getting laid regularly. But the thing is that's still a bridge too far for women. And
Mm.
so if they don't feel like they're with the guy that the best they could do, right? Is he really the best I can do? If the answer to that is no, well, there's always the fail-safe of divorce, and you can get out and before you're 40, nobody wants you, girl. And then you can get out and start over again. And that's a divorce porn fantasy that we sell women, because a lot of times women end up on the short end of that stick. They believe it, that the grass is greener, outside of the marriage, and it doesn't happen. But see, the thing that gets the reason why it's so controversial, like women hate to have this discussion, is because it seems like it's intentional.
Yeah.
It seems like, okay, here's the plan. I'm going to marry this poor schlub who's not, I'm going to settle for him. He's not really my first choice. I really wanted to get with Chad back in my 20s, but he's not going to be locked down. So I'm going to get with this guy, have 2 kids. And then she feels dissatisfied. She's unhappy, and she divorces him, takes him for half of his stuff, and takes the kids with him too. And if that seems like a plan, it seems like it's malicious. It seems like it was purpose, whether it was or it wasn't. The fact of the matter is I'm not trying to imply intent, but I am saying that this is the pattern and this is what happens. So I usually let other people sort of come to their conclusions about that.
Yeah.